The Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance is calling on BP to immediately suspend plans to sell alcohol at fuel stations, warning of negative repercussions. BP and Pick n Pay Express were issued a grocer's license in June, which allows them to sell wine in Joburg. To tell us more, let's speak to SAAPA Director Maurice Smithers, who joins us now via Zoom. Maurice, thank you so much for your time. Why do you want these petrol stations to stop selling alcohol?
Thanks very much, Clement. The reason why we want BP to stop, and in fact why we would like provincial governments not to issue such licenses, is partly because we already have in our national liquor policy a recommendation that such licenses are not actually awarded, and we have a liquor amendment bill which was approved by Cabinet in 2016 but has not yet been passed, which also specifically says that petrol stations should not have liquor licenses. And there's also a global movement that is suggesting this shouldn't happen, and it's related to the potential harmful consequences of doing this, including increasing the possible rate of drinking and driving.
Yeah, and the justification some people have used is that, well, this is normal in many countries. But then again, do those countries have a drinking problem like we have in our country? And do they have a 27% of all accidents caused by people driving under the influence of alcohol?
Well, look, I think all countries are having some problems with alcohol and with drinking and driving, but we certainly have in terms of motor vehicle incidents, car crashes, we have one of the highest rates in the world. And statistics show that 58% of car crash deaths are actually related to alcohol use. So, yeah, we do have a particular problem in South Africa. But in answer to your question about the rest of the world, there are at least 65 countries which don't actually allow alcohol to be sold from petrol stations. And the World Health Organization, in fact, is actively discouraging countries from allowing petrol to be sold because of this particular problem. So it's not as if it's a new issue. And as I pointed out to you, national government's already decided that they think that it shouldn't happen. And we got a letter today from the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Liquor Board, where they informed us that they feel very, very strongly that petrol stations shouldn't have liquor licenses, and that's written into their legislation. So it's not an uncommon thing, and it's certainly something that should be in place for the whole country.
Yeah, what have you observed in terms of like other petrol stations that are following suit? Because I imagine there were more applications, right, of fuel stations applying for this license.
Yes, no, that's an important point. What we have discovered is that BP have applied for at least 3 more in Gauteng and 2 in Cape Town, and Sasol has applied for 1 in Gauteng, in Rosebank. The one license, interestingly, we heard from the provincial government that the license that was given in Roodepoort in Johannesburg was given partly because there were no objections to the license. And that points to another problem, and that is that most people in the country are not even aware that they can actually object to an application for a liquor license. There is legislation in place that gives them that power. There's an obligation on people applying for a license to advertise that fact. But the reality is most people don't know that. So that's why the objection, maybe there were no objections to that one. But from what we understand from the Gauteng government, they are considering whether to do the other licenses, and we're hoping that they will decide not to, at least until National has decided to complete the process of passing the liquor amendment bill.
Yeah, and has BP responded to your memorandum?
BP hasn't responded to the memorandum. When we first heard about this, we wrote to them. We also wrote to the National Department of Trade and Industry and to Transport and to all the provincial departments dealing with liquor. BP responded in a very business-like fashion, let me say, that they argued that they were piloting this idea with the one that's got the license and with a couple more, and that they were really answering to customer demands and the idea of their petrol station shops giving a wider offering of services to the public. When we asked them whether they were responding to a direct request from the public to sell liquor in their shops, they declined to answer that, saying that wasn't, in fact, they said that wasn't the case. So I don't think that the public have been directly asking for liquor to be sold there. They also said that they would obey regulations and comply with any conditions. But, you know, I had an interesting experience going to the shop in question. I went there with a young woman who's over the age of 18, but could quite easily look under 18. And I asked her, I went and bought a bottle of wine at the shop. And you can see they wouldn't need to ask me for my ID. But in her case, they should have asked her for an ID, and they didn't. And so, you know, it's a problem because I mean, that's not just them. I mean, the same day we actually took a drive and we went to the Liquor City in Blairgowrie, and she went in and bought a bottle of whiskey. They didn't ask her for an ID there either. So there's a broader problem actually in society where, you know, even in bottle stores, they're not taking seriously the ID question. But that's all they've responded to. They've said they will respond to the memorandum in due course, and we hope they will soon, and we hope they will positively. We're asking them to just do, you know, to behave in a way that would be socially responsible, actually, because we think that there's no real need for alcohol to be sold there. I mean, another story I can tell you, which is quite interesting, is that BP is not on duty, actually. They're all working from home. So they asked the security people to come and take the memorandum from us. So 3 security people came and 1 person signed for the memorandum. But what was interesting was that one of the security guards said that he was 100% behind us, because when he goes on a long trip, if he's in a bus or a taxi, he wants to know that if his driver drives into a petrol station to buy fuel, that he can't walk into the shop and go and buy alcohol. And I think that was a really important statement from an ordinary citizen of South Africa who could see immediately what some of the potential consequences are of having liquor licenses at petrol stations.